It has been many years since the 1980 Olympia contest was held, yet it is still often talked about today. And we keep asking the same questions. What did Arnold look like? Should he have won? What was the argument between Arnold and Mike Mentzer about? And a long list of questions. From the hand of a photographer of the time, I reflect in this video his impressions. Paul Graham was the promoter. Dating back to 1967, Paul had brought many top bodybuilders out to Australia. Dave Draper being the first to guest pose at the IFBB Nationals. Paul had fought hard to get the Olympia to Sydney, and it cost him a lot of his time and money negotiating with Joe and Ben Wider. In addition, he had to attend to the organization of airline flights, hotel accommodation, cars and other similar things. It was a huge undertaking. Paul had an Australian magazine at the time named Muscle and Fitness, and in it, he advertised the contest and a list of contestants who had already accepted his invitation. At this stage there was no mention of Arnold, but rumors were spreading that he would definitely be making an appearance. Either as a judge or guest posing. The date of the evento was October 4th, our spring, and the venue would be held at the Sydney Opera House, one of the best locations in the world. The contest was to take place in the main hall, which overlooks the harbour and bridge, a perfect setting. Back then, I owned a gym in the eastern suburbs which was close to the hotel where most of the contestants would be staying. So naturally my gym became one of the obvious choices for workouts. Most of the competitors flew in together about a week before, to soak up the sun and prepare for the show. I went out to the airport, to take a few photos so I could get a good overall coverage. Some of the guys arrived separately, so I acted as a chauffeur and drove them to the hotel at Bondi Beach, a place which is similar to Venice Beach in Santa Monica, to give you some idea. A few days later, Arnold and Maria arrived. Arnold looked tanned and energetic. Again, I was at the airport and so were a film crew shooting a movie about the show. Naturally Arnold was the star. He had won 6 Olympias to date, but still, no mention of him entering. It wasn't long before he and Maria were driven away to the Hilton Hotel in the city. During that week, I would collect some of the guys to train at my gym. Frank Zane trained in the mornings, but most would work out in the late afternoon. Joe Gold and Reg Park, 2 others I drove back and forward, were both great guys with many interesting stories to tell. Reg was to be the main guest star of the show and Joe was going to sell his World Gym products. Since his arrival, Arnold had been training at a gym at Bondi. It had been there since the mid-50s and was well equipped. Everyone said he was in good shape, especially considering he had only had 7 weeks to train prior to his arrival. The rumor now was he would guest pose, along with Reg Park. The day of the show arrived. The judging was held on the Saturday morning in the main hall of the Opera House. The main show would come later, that evening. In this moment, Arnold had dropped a clanger. He decided he was going to compete, after all. Because of his last-minute decision, there were objections from some of the contestants, who felt he should have registered a month before like everybody else. So, Ben Wider held a meeting with all contestants downstairs, in one of the private rooms. In that room, there were heated words between Arnold and Mike Mentzer. It came close to fists, and comments like Arnold saying Mike could never win the Olympia with a big gut were thrown at each other. Eventually it was sorted out and Arnold was given the okay to enter. Still, a few remained unhappy about the decision. Due to the meeting, the judging was running an hour late, and the audience was becoming impatient as they had already been seated for an hour and a half, with no entertainment at all. Backstage, before the judging, the contestants were pumping up. I noticed Arnold looking a little agitated and wondered if it was because he was thinking he hadn't had as much time to prepare for this Olympia as he did for the other Olympias. He looked lean one moment, and big the next. Many felt he was retaining a lot of fluid, but the size was still there, and the veins prominent. He looked in better shape during the evening show, as it seemed he'd lost a bit more fluid by then. The judging began. The contestants walked out on stage with applause from the audience, who were surprised to see Arnold in the lineup, an added bonus for them. He did not disappoint in his ability to excite a crowd, as well as attract the judges with his charisma, antics and true showmanship. It was promising to be a stimulating and exciting competition indeed. As the comparisons continued and the contestants were asked to strike a required pose, Arnold would break the rules by jumping out of the line and hitting a most muscular or double bicep, much to the audience's delight. The others would follow only to discover Arnold stepping back as they went forward. Then they would step back and Arnold would go forward. The typical trick of the step forward, step back. This was repeated a few times to the annoyance of the judges. Arnold was given a warning. If he continued, he would be disqualified. Yet somehow, as we would see later on, it played to his advantage. Evaluating the physiques on stage. I didn't think Arnold looked his best, compared to the past. His thighs were smaller front on, and he wasn't as cut as he normally appeared in competition, but he still had a lot going for him and stood out. Zayn had great shape, and was ripped, but I felt he was too lean. Maybe he was 10 pounds short. Dickerson was in good shape, but his arms looked small. Coe was big and ripped, had exceptional arms but looked blocky. Mensah was also big but didn't look finished. Most bodybuilders had good size and proportion, but lacked competition muscularity. Looking at the lineup, all the contestants looked good generally, but had their individual faults. As Reg Park said to me after the judging, all eyes were on Arnold. He was the biggest and the tallest, and doing a side chest in a lineup. Who could compare? Bill Pearl was supposed to be head judge, but declined as he had helped Chris Dickerson prepare for the contest. Instead, he took over the role of interviewer for CBS television, who were doing a documentary on the Olympia. Throughout the show, he was interviewing all contestants, including Arnold. It was to run for an hour and be released in the US a month after the event. However, I heard it was canned and never went to air. A pity, because it would have been another version and a part of Olympia history. Another film called The Comeback, shot in 16mm, was made by an Australian filmmaker. But it was taken off the market due to legal reasons. I remember went to a private screening at a movie theatre to see it few weeks later. It played for just under an hour, and was very entertaining. During the judging break, before the main show, I was walking around the foyer talking to some of my friends about the judging and the comparisons between the guys, as well as taking some photos which I thought may be of interest. Remember, this was the time of film, not digital, so I was limited to how many shots I could take, time and cost-wise. Arnold was browsing the various merchandise set up in the foyer. There he approached Joe Gold, who also had his table set up, to get some feedback about the judging. Arnold looked confident, but still apprehensive. I took a lot of photos, in the foyer, of Arnold walking about. He was dressed casually and had two of his friends, Bill Drake and his personal photographer, in tow. The evening show arrived, and was packed out, standing room only, and believe me, they were standing. The atmosphere was electric, the audience greatly looking forward to the show ahead, especially knowing Arnold had entered. He was regarded as the bodybuilding phenomenon of the decade. When the contestants appeared on stage, the audience clapped, there were a few whistles and shouts, the show had begun. The evening was running smoothly as each contestant posed to his chosen music. I must say, every bodybuilder looked great under the lights, even the smoothest. There were a couple of pale entrants, who could have tanned up more. You have to have a good tan, even before the tanning lotion goes on to stand out in a competition. My friend Vince Basile, Mr. Canada 1970, was in the audience. With his camera set up in the best possible spot. He was taking black and white and color slides, while I was taking shots backstage. So, between both of us, we managed to get a very good coverage. Eventually I bought all the film from Vince. So I had a complete record of the show. Reg Park, a gentleman and true professional in his early 50s who had been unbeatable for 20 years. Gave a posing routine to the theme music, The Glass Mountain, which he had used since 1952. It was good to see one of the greats of bodybuilding, even though he wasn't in top shape. Reg had won the universe 3 times. And had made 5 Hercules films in the early 60s. When he weighed 253 pounds. Bev Francis, Australia's strongest woman, also gave a posing routine. Once the event was over, as each winner, from 6th to 1st was announced. Some were humble, others angry. Mike Mentzer and Boyer Co. left their trophies behind, vowing never to return to Australia again. In backstage, Frank Zane hurled his 3rd place trophy against the wall. When 2nd place winner, Chris Dickerson, was announced, we all knew who the winner would be. I remember Arnold, who was waiting in anticipation backstage right next to me, saying, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Then the announcement was made. Arnold leapt on stage at 1,000 miles an hour and I ran downstairs to the front of the audience almost as fast to take photographs. Even though the angle was wrong, too low for photos, it was the best spot to capture the moment. Joe Wider presented Arnold with his trophy and check. And both struck the victory pose, arms up. Arnold went to the microphone and gave his speech.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely excited about winning the 7th time the Mr. Olympia competition, and I have to be very honest that this was the highest level of competition I've ever faced in any competition in my life.
Another victory for Arnold, his 7th and last Mr. Olympia win. Bill Reynolds was at the contest and had his views on the show. Bill had seen Arnold win most of his Olympias. He said at the 71 and 74, Arnold was at his biggest, and at the 73 and 75, he was at his sharpest. Bill also said, Arnold wasn't in his best shape, but fairly good shape at the 1980 Mr. Olympia. According to his words, not bad after a 5-year retirement, whipping himself together in such a short period of time, taking a tremendous risk, if he had lost the value of his 6 previous magnificent Mr. Olympia wins. And indeed his unparalleled reputation to the sport would have been tarnished beyond redemption. Bill wrote, "As a last contribution to this video, I would like to show you the ratings of each of the 7 judges who made up the jury for this event. As a curious fact, we can see that certain of them, like the Belgian or the American Dan Howard, put Arnold far behind the first place. Everyone can make their assessments. Personally, I think Arnold had something on the floor that no one else had. That charisma and that presence on stage that has always captivated the public and the judges as well. Don't forget to leave us your comment and subscribe to our channel, if you are not yet. It is not mandatory, but it encourages us to continue keeping the channel running.